Welcome to A Play to Win Deck Tech, where we talk about decks in cEDH. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Cameron. This week we're going to be talking about Tymna Tana Blood Pod, brought to you by Moxfield.
Today we're going to be talking about my particular version of Blood Pod. So if you want to follow along, you can do that at the Moxfield deck list down below. That'll be really easy to help so you can see all the cards that we're talking about. Blood Pod is a Sans Blue STAX strategy utilizing Tymna the Weaver and Tana the Blood Sower at the helm. Tymna, of course, a 1 white and a black for a legendary creature, human cleric with lifelink that says at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you may pay X life, where X is the number of opponents that were dealt combat damage this turn. If you do, draw X cards. It has partner and is a 2/2, and Tana costs 2 red and a green for a legendary creature elf druid with trample that says whenever Tana deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green sapling creature tokens, and it's a 2/2. Now, while Tymna is one of the main focuses of this deck, we're really just using Tana for the colors, but if the game goes late, Tana can be helpful. Now, at this point, Blood Pod, if you ask most cEDH players, they would probably tell you that this is a classic cEDH archetype. It's been around for a long time, basically since the partners were introduced, and it's done a great job of evolving with the metagame. There's many different iterations of this deck, like Metapod and Butterfree. Although it's a STAX deck, more than anything, Blood Pod kind of behaves like a tempo deck, in my opinion. I'm looking to stop my opponents for just long enough so that I can assemble a win condition. I'm not looking to lock them out of the game entirely. I'm looking to win first and foremost. But today we're going to be going over my list and what I think are some of the main core aspects of the deck, which is slowing your opponents down just long enough for you to complete one of your mana-intensive but very efficient win conditions.
Exactly. So let's start off by talking about what those win conditions are.
The main thing that we're going to be trying to do is making infinite attackers with Kiki-Jiki. That's going to be our combo line, but there's a couple different ways to do that. The Birthing Pod line requires 9 mana total, or really 6 mana total if you have a 3 mana creature out already, and luckily Tymna is a 3 mana creature. We'll need 6 mana and a 3 mana creature in play. For 3 mana and 2 life, we can cast Birthing Pod. Paying 1 mana and 2 more life, we can sacrifice the 3-drop looking for a Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian comes in and flickers Birthing Pod. Activate Birthing Pod again with 2 more life, sacrificing the Felidar Guardian looking for a 5-drop. Karmic Guide is the 5-drop that we'll find, which will reanimate the Felidar Guardian, flickering the Birthing Pod. For 1 more time, we will activate the Birthing Pod, sacrificing the Felidar Guardian, finding Kiki-Jiki. Kiki-Jiki can tap to make a copy of Karmic Guide, which will reanimate the Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian will come in and flicker the Kiki-Jiki, then we will be able to tap the Kiki-Jiki to make another copy of Felidar Guardian, which will come in and flicker the Kiki-Jiki, and we can repeat this loop as many times as we'd like. Although it is kind of mana intensive, all you really need is Birthing Pod and the Tymna, which is in your command zone.
And even if it is mana intensive, you're set up a lot of the times to go to the late game, so between mana dorks and hitting your land drops, you have a really good chance of getting an adequate amount of mana.
Now, if say for some reason you don't have Birthing Pod, or there's a Collector Oof in play or something like that, there are still ways to win using Survival of the Fittest. For this line, we'll need 10 total mana, 4 of it green, 2 of it white. With 1 green and a generic, we can cast Survival of the Fittest. Using another green, we can discard a creature card to search our library for Felidar Guardian. We can activate Survival of the Fittest again to discard the Felidar Guardian looking for Kiki-Jiki. Activate the Survival of the Fittest 1 more time, discarding the Kiki-Jiki looking for Karmic Guide. Spending 5 mana, 2 of it white to cast the Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide will reanimate the Kiki-Jiki. We can tap the Kiki-Jiki to make a copy of Karmic Guide. The copy of Karmic Guide will reanimate Felidar Guardian. The Felidar Guardian will flicker Kiki-Jiki. We can tap the Kiki-Jiki to make a copy of Felidar Guardian and present the same loop as before, making as many attackers as we want.
So there you have it. 2 1-card win conditions in here that are able to go find all of the pieces that you need to put together a win.
Other versions of this deck use things like Splinter Twin or Yisan to assemble win conditions, but I'm not playing any of those cards, instead of opting for more protection in my deck and a little bit more interaction. I am also playing Village Bellringer as an additional combo with Kiki-Jiki. Village Bellringer works great at the end step to flash it in, and then on my turn I can cast the Kiki-Jiki from my hand if it ends up in there. And if all of that comboing won't work, we are playing Elish Norn to quickly and swiftly destroy all of our opponent's creatures and kill them with combat damage.
Yes, Elish Norn is also a very viable win condition when you're staxing out the board and really punishing those decks that actually do play a lot of creatures.
Since we're playing so many hate bears, we're going to end up with a lot of attackers that can get through pretty quickly, so we'll be able to quickly and efficiently end the game once Elish Norn is out, hopefully.
Next, we're going to talk about some of the signature cards that you're going to see in the Blood Pod decks. I think if you go through pretty much every Blood Pod deck, I think this is where you'll start to see a lot of the similarities come from.
Right, yeah, so the STAX pieces. These are the main cards you're using to stop your opponents. Now, I think it's important to remember, at least from my point of view, the point of STAX is the goal is not to stop our opponents from winning. That may seem like a lot of players' goals when playing STAX. The goal is to win the game. That's what I want to do. I want to win the game. That's the goal above all else. In my opinion, stopping my opponents from doing anything is a great way to get me to the win. So I'm not looking to completely lock my opponents out for no reason. I'm looking to lock my opponents out so I can find a win condition.
I think that is a great distinction because I think that is going to affect how we play the game down the line then.
So first, let's start off with some of our non-creature STAX pieces. Although these are the cheapest ones, they don't draw cards off of Tymna, so there is a trade-off. Chalice of the Void is great at stopping a whole plethora of different things depending on what we think our opponents are playing.
If you don't believe me, see last week's video.
Root Maze and Deafening Silence are fantastic because they're 1 mana. A STAX deck having access to both of these cards in the deck I think is really important. Thorn of Amethyst is also a non-creature STAX piece, but this one is particularly helpful against non-creature strategies, and we are playing 37 creatures in this deck. And then as far as creatures that we're using to stop our opponents, we have Collector Oof, Dothi Voidwalker, Dranith Magistrate, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, Archon of Emeria, Eidolon of Rhetoric, Aven Mind Sensor, Opposition Agent, Magus of the Moon, Mayhem Devil, Sanctum Prelate, Linvala, Keeper of Silence, and Archon of Valor's Reach.
Oh my god, you have so much. I can stop so much in there.
I've decided to go with this particular suite because I think these are the cards that pack the most punch and carry the most weight, pound for pound.
And I think that it's also a really good universal package that you have in here too.
Pairing up Sanctum Prelate with Chalice of the Void can be really, really powerful, and pairing up things like Collector Oof, Magus of the Moon, and Linvala can basically shut off all decks from any forms of mana. That's the main reason that these cards are in here. I decided to go kind of as broad as possible with a lot of these things. I'm not looking to have laser focused, very particular things that stop particular decks. I'm looking to stop what everyone is doing.
Which is nice when you're going into constant vacuums all the time like we are. If you know, that's why they called this deck Metapod. It was because you were able to perfectly sculpt it around what the meta is. So once the meta stops being as staxy as it is now, you can totally evolve the deck into something else.
Exactly.
So now that we were done talking about some of the signature STAX pieces that you'll see in this deck, we're going to move on and talk about some of the more interactive cards.
First up, we have Boseiju Who Endures. Now, we are currently, as filming this, in the middle of Kamigawa spoilers. I haven't actually played this card yet, but I have a hard time believing that it is anything other than premium removal. It is essentially uncounterable, gets around Rule of Law, which we are playing, and at worst, it taps for a green to cast our Mana Dorks or any of our other green spells. We'll go over to Moxfield in a little while, and I can show you exactly the percentages of how much this deck is a green deck, but it's a pretty high percent, so this is going to cast a decent amount of spells. Assassin's Trophy and Abrupt Decay are really great catch-alls. Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast, I think, are necessary in non-blue decks as ways to interact at all on the stack.
At least one of them.
Force of Vigor, Endurance, Solitude, and Deflecting Swat are great ways to interact for free. Solitude is actually a fairly new include in the deck, but it is easily tutorable and great removal, so I think this is going to end up doing pretty well.
We're always talking about onboard creature interaction, I feel like, and that's kind of a nice way to get that in a mostly white deck.
There are surprisingly a lot of white cards in this deck, and also this being able to be found with Eldritch Evolution or Worldly Tutor is really good. And for some more stack interaction that is more protecting us than stopping our opponents, we have Silence, Veil of Summer, Grand Abolisher, Allosaurus Shepherd, Sylvan Safekeeper, and Ranger Captain of Eos. I think Ranger Captain of Eos being able to find Sylvan Safekeeper or Allosaurus Shepherd can offer an enormous range of protection, and Grand Abolisher is just really, really good. So I like including these in the deck, and Allosaurus Shepherd is also really helpful in the very late game, turning our Mana Dorks into big 5/5s.
And I like to look at the Ranger Captain. I mean, first of all, it can also be card draw and go get you an Esper Sentinel.
It absolutely can be.
It's also an onboard stacks piece where, like, there's a bunch of decks that know if I make a certain move, that thing is going to get popped and I'm going to be stopped in my tracks.
Yeah, the Ad Nauseam deck cannot win through a Ranger Captain of Eos, so...
How do we find these pieces? How do we find our win condition? How do we find these interactive pieces if we need them? What are the tutors?
Since we're in black and green, we're going to be gaining access to some of the best tutors tutors that we have in cEDH. For black ones, we have Vampiric Tutor, Imperial Seal, Demonic Tutor, and Diabolic Intent. This one is particularly good when we need to get rid of one of our own STAX pieces. Fortunately, our win conditions are particularly powerful because they can win through Rule of Law, which we're playing, but sometimes we'll need to Diabolic Intent away our Collector Oof to be able to use our Birthing Pod or something like that, so this one is really helpful there. Enlightened Tutor can find both of our win conditions, Survival of the Fittest and Birthing Pod, and Worldly Tutor can find one of our 37 creatures in the deck, as well as Eladamri's Call. Eldritch Evolution is good for the same reason that Diabolic Intent is good, and also for the same reason that the green creature tutors are good, and Finale of Devastation can actually act as a win condition if I can make enough mana and get into the super late game, or be a reanimation spell. It's just a very versatile spell. I'm playing Fiend Artisan instead of Yi-San. A lot of the decks are playing Yi-San because Yi-San can actually be a win condition in its own right. I have found the Yi-San win conditions to be too slow, so instead I like Fiend Artisan because it can very quickly find Elish Norn, which I like.
You could also put Birthing Pod and Survival of the Fittest in this stack too, but they're better in some other stack.
There's also a couple extra ways to draw cards. Tymna is obviously the best one, but we have Esper Sentinel, Dark Confidant, Loyal Apprentice, which I'm including as card draw because the Flying Thopters that it makes with Tymna out directly correlate to cards drawn, because that's the only reason that you're using this for. So this can immediately be 2 cards and following be 3 cards, and it can just end up drawing you a lot of cards with Tymna. And Sylvan Library is obviously a very powerful must-include green draw engine.
How do we pay for all of this stuff? You need mana to run the deck.
The main way we're going to be doing it is going to be with Mana Dorks, since we're in green and we're going to be playing a lot of 3 drops in our deck. 1 mana Mana Dorks that get you 3 mana on turn 2 are really good. So we have Deathrite Shaman, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Elves of Deep Shadow, Birds of Paradise, Ignoble Hierarch, Llanowar Elves, Flinthorn Elves, Elvish Mystic, and then, of course, we have Dockside Extortionist because it's Dockside Extortionist. I've chosen in my list to not play things like Null Rod, which some of the other lists do, mainly because I really like Birthing Pod being able to win whenever I want, and Dockside Extortionist is also really great at helping Birthing Pod win because it makes a lot of mana, which is good with the mana-intensive win conditions.
Yeah, we did say it was a lot of mana to get those combos off.
That's why we're winning in the late game. That's why this is a STAX deck. We're looking to win on turn 6, so paying 6 mana is totally acceptable.
Totally fine.
We also have Carpet of Flowers because this is a blue world, and of course, Chrome Mox, Mox Diamond, Mana Crypt, and Soul Ring, the 4 artifact mana that I think go in every single deck.
The Power 4.
Power 4 in cEDH. This truly is these cards. And then for when it all goes wrong, of course, we have Noxious Revival. I never know where to put Recursion in any of these organization piles.
Finale of Devastation could also go in this pile too.
Right, yeah, exactly. Noxious Revival, I like to think of it sometimes as a tutor. It just lets you tutor your graveyard.
It's also interaction.
It can be interaction. You can stop a World Gorger Dragon combo or some Underworld Breach shenanigans sometimes.
So what are your lands, man? What are you playing for lands?
So we have the best lands starting off, the fetch lands. We're not playing Scalding Tarn, we're playing all the other ones. Duel Lands come next. A couple of shock lands, a couple of basics, not playing Mountain. Horizon Canopy and Nurturing Peatland to draw some cards. Ancient Tomb and Gaia's Cradle to add some extra mana. And some 5 color lands as well as Gemstone Caverns to give us a little boost. You could also put Boseiju Who Endures in the land pile because it is a land, actually. I count it as interaction.
We'll see how many times it gets played as a land versus gets cast as a spell.
I'm sure I will convince myself to shave that back down to 30 lands in no time.
Oh, yeah.
So those are all the cards in the deck. Let's go over to Moxfield so we can talk about some of the stacks and maybe do some test hands.
You weren't kidding when you said that white and green made a significant portion of this deck.
It's really basically a Selesnya deck.
Take a look at this, man. This is nuts. 42% of your deck is green cards.
Yeah, which makes Force of Vigor really powerful, which is nice. And a lot of those green cards are Mana Dorks too, which are great things to discard to Survival of the Fittest and
again,
stuff like
like
that.
Endurance is also very nice here too.
Before we get too much into it further, I think now seems like a great time to talk about our sponsor, Moxfield, real quick.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Moxfield is without a doubt the best site for brewing and building your Magic the Gathering decks. They're constantly adding new features like enhanced tagging to help with organizing your deck and collection, drag and drop across views for easier sorting, and one of my favorite features, the compare function, which lets you easily compare decks to see the differences. We're going to do that in a second. I'm going to compare this deck to Butterfree and Metapod, the 2 other main Blood Pod decks, and we'll see the differences. I'm about 80 to 85 cards similar between both of those lists.
But Moxfield, above all else, is easy to use. It looks great. So come join us there, because if you send us a deck list anywhere else, I'm not going to be able to read it.
I literally won't be able to read it if it's not
No.
Moxfield. If we go over to Moxfield, we can see the 30 47 creatures in the list. We can also see the 5 sorceries, and all of them are tutors. 13 instants, all of them are interaction and tutors, and 7 artifacts. If we can compare to Metapod and Butterfree, we can see some of the differences that they're playing.
Also, if you're not a Pokemon person, they're Pokemon names. Butterfree is the evolution of Metapod.
Basically, these were the deck's names as they evolved to combat the meta. Metapod was the first evolution, Butterfree the next. I believe, I don't know the lore super well. But either way, in the compare function here, you can see the differences in some of these lists. Both of these lists are playing Meltdown. One of them is playing No Rod. There's a couple difference in STAX choices. That's going to happen with every Blood Pod list ever, and it should, because, as we talked about before, Blood Pod is supposed to adapt to the meta. Blood Pod should look like however you think it would be most powerful to look, and it should fit your playstyle, I think. My version of the list fits my playstyle. I go way up on creatures. I go way down on dis-synergies. What's a better word for that?
No, there's no better word for that.
Just, I like to have as few unsynergies. I like synergies in my deck. So I play more creatures. And if we go to the colors, we can see this is a 42% green deck, a 30% white deck, 19% black, and only 13% red. We're not playing a basic mountain, and I think about cutting the basic swamp all the time. Before we finish this up with a couple of test hands, I want to also talk about some of the pros and cons of this list. Some of the pros being you're playing Tymna, and in my opinion, Tymna is the best commander in the format. You're also playing 4 colors, and 4 colors is a lot of colors. Some of the cons are you're not playing 5 colors. You're not playing blue, and that kind of stinks.
I think in general, not playing blue can be a con too. I don't know. That's how I look at it.
Your main combo also folds to Curse Totem and Null Rod. That was once upon a time a big negative. Now, Curse Totem sees much less play, so it's not as big a deal. But it is a negative to think about that your combo is pretty easily interacted with and kind of intensive. You're not playing Thassa's Oracle Consultation, so in any type of interaction, spot removal is going to break up your combo. Another big con of Blood Pod is, in my opinion, I think it's weak to Winota. A lot of your stacks don't really affect Winota. In fact, Winota plays most of them in their deck, so Winota can benefit a lot from your stacks pieces being in play, and they're also pretty good at stopping you from winning, stopping Blood Pod from winning, I think.
Who would you recommend this deck to?
If you're not a fan of blue, I think this is one of the best decks for you. If you like playing Jund, if you like grinding value, this is a really great Tymna deck, and you can benefit a lot from your smart choices. It might not be the best for newer players just because stacks can be a little bit tricky to comprehend how you're winning the game because you're playing for the long haul. You really need to understand how to plan for a 10-turn game, and that can be kind of tricky. But that's not to say that it's impossible to pick up. New players can definitely pick up Blood Pod. It is so fucking powerful, you'll win games. Tymna is really strong, and you can count to 6 with the Birthing Pod in your hand, and that's going to get there a lot of the time. That's one of the joys of Blood Pod, is that it can win quickly. A lot of STAX decks have a difficult time closing out the game. This deck, although can grind into forever if it's stopped, can also present a very early win if it has the right starter, which I think is important for a STAX deck to have.
Yeah, I think that some of the win-con list STAX decks really suffer because of that.
And this deck can feel more like a tempo deck. You're trying to stop your opponents from winning just long enough to get you to 6 mana with the Tymna in play and the Birthing Pod in hand. That's all.
You're a speed bump. You're not a stop sign. You're a speed bump.
I just want to slow them down so they have to waste their turn paying 2 mana for a Ponder to try to get rid of the Collect Roof, and while they're spinning their wheels doing nothing, I can set up a win condition. I particularly think this deck is good against mid-range decks that play a small amount of stacks pieces. Decks that are playing just a Drannith Magistrate or just an Aven Mind Sensor. For the same reason why Blood Pod is weak to Winota, Blood Pod is good against mid-range decks in my opinion, because you can utilize those stacks pieces and they don't really hurt you, and they slow down your opponents just like how you want your own stacks pieces to slow your opponents down. Let's get into some test hands, but before we do, let's talk about what the pod composition is going to be. So where are we sitting and who are we playing against?
Okay, so let's say that we are going second. First up is Najeela, followed by us on Tymna Tana Blood Pod, followed by Kinnan, followed by maybe another non-blue deck like Gitrog.
So this is potentially a good matchup for us, I think. Since we're a green deck, we're going to be looking for some extra mana production. So ideally, we either want mana production or a stacks piece on turn 1. In my opinion, stacks piece is more important. I'd much rather play a Deafening Silence than a Birds of Paradise, but it depends on so many things like turn order and the decks you're playing against. But ideally, you will want some form of mana production extra, 2 lands, a stacks piece, interaction, a tutor, and then something else. If that's something else is a second stacks piece, fantastic. Basically, you're just looking for a balance of the good cards in your deck, hopefully ones that interact against the table. That's the most important part. Since we're playing a stacks deck, it's important to understand, is Collector Oof particularly good at this table? If so, can I mulligan for it? Is that a possible thing that I can do? Is this, a hand that it can produce something that can stop my opponents, or can this hand do something that can produce a win for me? Same in things that you're looking for in a lot of other cEDH decks, but that's what we're looking for in Blood Pod.
I have a test stand here. Scrubland, Abrupt Decay, Forest, Llanowar Elves, Chalice of the Void, Force of Vigor, and Dwathy Voidwalker. How do you feel about this? First thoughts.
Dwathy Voidwalker does shut off Gitrog combo, right?
Quite a bit, yeah. It's hard to put things in your graveyard.
We can't cast the Dwathy just yet.
This hand does not cast a turn 2 Tymna.
That's true. Yeah, that is notable. This hand doesn't cast turn 2. I think I would probably, knowing that I'm playing against Gitrog and Kinnan, the Chalice seems powerful, and holding up Force of Vigor with Abrupt Decay can, I think, stop the Kinnan's combo and some of the Najeela's combos, because if they play the enchantment, the Force of Vigor can stop it. So we have a couple ways to stop our opponents and some ramp, and I think it's keepable, but I might get punished if I never draw a way to cast Tymna.
Well, the top card of your library was an Arid Mesa, so I think we ended up out really nicely.
We're definitely going to win this game.
So this was a key.
Definitely going to win and crush this game. Let's look at another one.
Chalice of the Void, Esper Sentinel, Karmic Guide, Temple Garden, Mox Diamond, Taiga, and Marsh Flats. The Esper Sentinel getting down as early as possible is helpful when two other decks have to go through their turn 1 specifically.
This isn't the greatest hand. I do think I would still keep it because it has stacks, draw, and enough mana to do those things. I think I would keep this and then hope that we can just get some more interaction.
All right, let's try for an interesting one. Lands are Temple Garden, Arid Mesa, and Nurturing Peatland. Mana Dork is Elvish Mystic, Endurance, Village Bellringer, and Abrupt Decay. So initial thoughts, this hand seems less exciting than the others.
This one is safe, but I don't think it does enough. We do have the free interaction on Endurance and Astro if we can get rid of anything, as well as half a combo piece, but I don't know. I think this is just too dull a hand. I think turn 1 Elvish Mystic, turn 2 Tymna is not a worthy keep. I think we need to be interacting immediately, and this doesn't do that.
I would agree with this one. So let's go to a second 7 here. Gaia's Cradle and Basic Plains as your lands. Flinthorn Elf, Enlightened Tutor, Collector Oof, Fiend Artisan, and Dranith Magistrate. I don't like this one very much.
It's close. It's very close.
So you can E-Tutor for something that's going to make you mana.
You could Enlightened Tutor for Chromox. I think this one's a mulligan. It's too awkward. There's too many things that you have to do to try to make it playable.
The only thing that I would want to realistically get would be the Sentinel, but even here, that's too slow. That's not really what there's better things we can do. So.
Yeah, the only thing that I could think might make me want to play this is the Dranith Magistrate is really good, and you can Plains into Chromox for turn 2 Dranith Magistrate and hope that's good enough to ride to victory. Maybe it is.
But you can also just do that by playing land.
So upon further reflection, I actually think this hand is fine. Turn 1 Enlightened Tutor into Chromox to turn 2 pitch Collector Oof for Findhorn Elves Dranith Magistrate is probably fine against Gitrog Monster Kinnan Najeela, or pitching the Fiend Artisan instead of the Collector Oof if they have artifact starts is probably also fine. This hand is actually probably keeping is good.
All right, so this is our 6-card hand. We got Birds of Paradise, Eldritch Evolution, Sylvan Safekeeper, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Bloodstained Mire, Mayhem Devil, and a basic forest.
This one's pretty close on a 6. I'm probably keeping this.
I was going to say the same thing too, right?
Yeah, I think I maybe pitch Sylvan Safekeeper to the bottom. Turn 1 Birds into who the hell knows. It depends so much, but probably either Mayhem Devil or Eldritch Evolution for a 2-drop if I think something like Dranith Magistrate or Collector Oof would be particularly good.
Or Tymna if you have time and not too much is going on.
Right, yeah. But I think as a 6, this is fine. We have mana, a couple of extra producing mana, Mayhem Devil as a way to interact with the board, which is going to be good against Najeela and Gitrog and Kinnan probably. Eldritch Evolution is great with the Mayhem Devil, so yeah, I think I'm going for turn 1 Birds, turn 2 Mayhem Devil, turn 3 Eldritch Evolution, and go from there. And I think this is a great 6.
Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at Patreon, like our $50 patrons.
Julius Cortana, Byron Wang, Jared Silver, Vapor Snag, C, Khwaji Ahmed, Jacob Depp, Reese Uker, Kai Hornisher, CZ, Jan Wildfang, Adrian Grimm, Jason Jarvis, Tommy the Oddball, Swampy McGee, Peter Larson, Cameron James, Jormags, Ugly, and Moxfield. Baby Jeebus, Baby Jeebus, Baby Jeebus.
He's gonna appear in a mirror now. Check out our Bonfire store for our t-shirts, sweatshirts, and the rest of our cool merch too.
If you want to check out any of the cards we talked about today, or just buy the entire deck, you can actually do that at Moxfield. You can just go through the Moxfield link and go right over to a TCG player through there, and you'll be able to get the cards.
For our Alter Sleeves affiliate link, you can get 5% off your order, so check that out too.
If you want to pick up any Dragon Shield product, you can do that at our affiliate link, which will also help support the channel.
PlayDohMTG.com has playmats and tokens and coins, so check them out too.
Thanks for watching.
See you next time. If you want to check out any of the games with Blood Pod, check out the playlist that Dylan created. You can see all of the games that Blood Pod came up in.